Hello, and welcome back to ATA Live. I am your host, John Humphreys from the ATA standing for Australian Taxpayers Alliance. As you can see, it's written down the bottom, got it scrolling this time instead of just stuck on the screen. Australian Taxpayers Alliance, a small group in Australia out there arguing and pushing for lower taxes, smaller government, individual freedom. If you agree with those themes, check out the website, check us out. And if you are so inclined, consider becoming a member, getting involved. That's the introductory stuff. These live streams, we've been doing these normally twice a week in the lead up to this federal election, Mondays and Thursdays. It's oscillated between 7:30 and 8:30. You can see today it is 8:30. We'll try to bed one of those down permanently at some stage soon. But we've been doing this Mondays and Thursdays, not this week for Monday because it was a public holiday for Easter. I hope you're all with your family having a good time, as I was. This is being simulcast on X, Facebook, and YouTube for the ATA page and my personal page. Wherever you're following it, if I can ask you to stop, pause, give it a like, give it a share, that helps us with the algorithm, and jump around on those social media pages if you can, and give us a follow. Australian Taxpayers Alliance and John Humphreys. So that's all the introductory stuff out of the way. This is done live, so you can see the mistakes live as they happen. That also means I can take your comments and questions. If you're interested in chucking in a comment, a question, a criticism, or anything else starting with a curse sound, feel free to write it in. And if we've got some time at the end, we'll engage with some of those. Having said all of that, so introductory stuff out of the way. What's been on lately? Look, on a personal note, I just recently finished doing a podcast with the Collectivitis crew, the Collectivitis podcast. It was hosted by Pietro's, a bright guy down in Melbourne. And if you haven't seen it before, I suggest getting along and checking out the Collectivitis crew. Let me see if I can find this one episode. This will be it. Yeah. So this is this is where they can be found on X. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them on Spotify. They run a nice little podcast. It's been running for a while now, as you see there, up to 85 episodes. We had a good chat about all things economic, tax related. Me ranting about my disappointment at the state of the tax policy debate in this election, and all the other things you've come to expect me to rant about. The runaway size of government, how it's unsustainable, the debt trajectory, etc. So go and have a look. It was a fun conversation. It's not too long, and give those guys a like and a follow as well if you haven't already. So I did that. I also was involved in some live streams about the leaders debate earlier this week. Some of you may have seen. I hosted that with Craig Kelly and John Ruddock as the other members of the hosting party. Craig Kelly, of course, being a candidate for Senate in the upcoming federal election for the Libertarian Party in New South Wales, and John Ruddock being the Libertarian Party's MLC, Member of Parliament in the New South Wales Upper House. So we had a bit of fun watching that. I say fun, we had fun bantering. It was a painfully boring debate, as I'm sure if any of you guys suffered through the indignity of watching it, you would have come to agree. So there's not too much to report on that debate. The only other thing that's popped up this week that I think is worth mentioning before I get into the meat and potatoes of this episode is that I'm not sure who amongst you saw this, but I found this interesting, unexpected. Let me share this with you. So this was a video, an advert I saw on YouTube. I think it was yesterday. I recorded it. I missed the first couple of seconds of this advert, but it was an advert from the Trumpet of Patriots. I'm calling this section, when trumpets attack, right? So the Trumpet of Patriots have decided they do not like One Nation. And I just want to share this little video this snippet. So I took this with my phone pointed at the camera, my phone pointed at the computer when this came up, because it was an advert, so I wasn't able to save it any other way. But this is what I got, pointing my camera at the computer screen. You can enjoy it with me now.
Dutton, One Nation is no nation. It's a Liberal Party front. They refuse to defend free speech and are evil. Vote 1, Trumpet of Patriots.
What I As a friend of mine pointed out, it's interesting that they are a Liberal Party front and they don't support free speech. That's what they lead with. And then just at the end, oh yeah, and by the way, they're evil. So anyway, that's, I guess, ramping it up to 11 there from the trumpets. I'm not sure that that's going to work. I really suspect it isn't. I don't think that's going to achieve much. I don't think it's going to turn too many people off voting One Nation, but it was certainly dramatic. It was an interesting one to see. So if the goal is to get people talking, it's got me talking. So I guess mission accomplished from the trumpets. Anyway, with that said, that's a nice segue because that, of course, is all about the minor party race, which realistically happens in the Senate. And that's the topic I was going to dive into first today, if I can get the technology to work. So we discussed the Senate a little bit a while ago, and I just recently gone through it again and was assessing what I thought was going to happen, putting together some predictions. And as I did that, there's a few interesting races that come out of the Senate race. Of course, the Senate race is effectively 6 or 8, counting the territories, 8 different races. At least it's not 150 if you're looking at the lower house, 150 different races. But 8 different races for the Senate. So it's much more manageable to be able to get your head around it. And each one has its own little quirk, except for the Northern Territory, which is very boring because it'll just be the Liberals or the Nationals. Of course, up there it's called the Country Liberals. But the Country Liberals will get one, Labor will get one, no one else gets a look in. So we can just put the Northern Territory race to bed. If you're from the Northern Territory, you still have to vote, but it's not a fun one to talk about. But the others are interesting. And the total conclusion of the Senate race is quite jarring. I think for people, especially if you're on the small government side of politics, the centre right, the libertarian, the free market, any of those, this is not a Senate that I think we're going to be pleased with. Although, we've got a week and a half to try and change that. We can see if we can change the world. Just the group of us listening here. But the situation, I'll bring up this screen now. So as I write here, and I think I've said before, most people are following the Dutton-Albanese race, like that pointless debate we had on Tuesday. I think the Senate race is underappreciated and more important than most people appreciate because it's the same thing. I just said the same thing twice. But because, of course, nothing can pass through Parliament without it passing through the Senate. So all of these promises are basically for nothing. I mean, nearly every Dutton promise is for nothing unless he can get Labor to agree, as you'll see in a second. The Senate is not going to be easy to deal with. So just going through this, the state of play, just to lay the situation out on the table. Currently, there was 76 senators, so you need 39 votes to pass. So 39, that's the magic number. Keep thinking about that. Can you get to 39? Labor currently has 25, which for the very astute among you, you will notice that is not 39. That is not even close to 39. Labor cannot pass anything without a lot of help. So the most obvious place for them to look for help are the Greens, but you'll see here the Greens have 11 now, 25 plus 11, that's 36. They're still 3 votes short. And then you've got what I call here the minor left. And there's 4 votes there. So that's how Labor passes things through the Parliament. The Greens aren't enough. They have balance of power in that they could block Labor legislation. But Labor plus the Greens aren't enough, which has actually been relevant with some tax change. It's escaping me now, embarrassingly. No, I think it's an IR change. It was a Labor market change that a couple of the minor left had qualms about, so has been held up. But anyway, you can see here that the left of politics does have the votes. If you add up Labor, the Greens, and the minor left, that adds up to 40. They need 39. So 40 is enough. The left has the numbers. You can see down here, we broadly call the right, 30 for the Liberals, 2 for One Nation, 4 for the minor right, adds up to 36. So you've got 40 versus 36. That's the current split of the Senate. So if the Senate was split evenly, it would be 38-38. It's not split evenly. Our current Senate tilts to the left, 40-36. The Liberals and Nationals, I've got Liberals and Nationals combined here, they've got the single biggest block, but neither of the major parties are within cooee of being able to pass anything on their own. And I suspect they're not going to, maybe never again, right, with the current trajectory of politics. So that's the situation as it is. When I say minor left and minor right, who do I mean? I'll just unpack that. So Lydia Thorpe, ex-Green, obviously on the left. Fatima Payman, she's trying to pitch to the centre, but she's ex-Labor. Call her on the left. David Pocock, independent from the ACT, he's basically a teal. And Jackie Lambie, I know she would probably say, no, I'm not on the left, but on nearly every issue she's ever spoken about, she's on the left. So, I guess because she's kind of bogan and swears a lot, she says that makes her right wing. But politically, in terms of policy, she nearly always comes down on the left of most issues, even to the left of Labor on most issues. Now, of course, not everyone in the Senate is up for election. And when it comes to these minor left, Fatima Payman and Lydia Thorpe aren't up for re-election. So they're definitely in the Senate. There's no getting rid of them. But David Pocock is, or all territory senators are always up for election. And Jackie Lambie is up for election this year. So I should say as well, the brackets I've used up here show you how many of them are up for re-election this time. So 25 Labor, but 12 of them are safe, 13 up for re-election. The Greens, there's 11 in Parliament now, 5 of them are safe, 6 up for re-election, and that's what all the rest of the brackets mean. So just the minor right quickly, what does that mean? Ralph Babet for the UAP. Tammy Tyrrell got elected on a Lambie platform. I don't really know what she stands for, but the best I can tell, she seems to be sort of a wishy-washy centrist, but not hostile to the right. And on a few issues, she seems to have given indication that she might be sort of friendly to a centre-right position. Anyway, she's dealable, withable from a Liberal government. So that's why I put her on the minor right. David Van, ex-Liberal, won't get re-elected, so it doesn't matter. And Gerard Rennick, who, apologies, Gerard, I think I've misspelt your name with an extra R there. But anyway, Gerard Rennick, ex-Liberal, now People First. So that's the team on the right. Ralph Babet and Tammy Tyrrell aren't up for re-election, so they're safe, lock them away. But David Van is up for re-election, and he's not running seriously, so he'll lose. And Gerard Rennick is up for re-election, and he's running very seriously, and we'll see if he can win. So, and as I said before, the left has the majority here, 40 to 36, because remember, it's 39 is how many you need. So if it was balanced, it would be 38-38. If it was balanced left and right, 38-38, and you need 39 to pass, and currently the left has 40. So the Senate is good for the left at the moment. Looking forward, unfortunately, it looks likely to stay that way. So let me unpack this a little bit. Going through each of the states one by one, not Northern Territory, because it's not very interesting. And as you'll see here, as we get to them, there's a few of these states that are quite interesting. I mean, New South Wales isn't the most interesting, but bear with me, because a few of these could be fun. So in New South Wales, and there's 6 people up for election each state. And you'd say this, some people might feel it's inappropriate just to give up seats, but realistically, there's some things we just know, right? So for New South Wales, Liberal and Labor are both polling around 30% or plus. Even if they lose a few percentage, even if they lose 5%, they're getting 2, right? They're just getting 2 straight off the bat. And the Greens are polling over 10% in New South Wales. So it's very likely, just as soon as we start, we can just give up 5 of the New South Wales seats, 2 Liberal, 2 Labor, and 1 Green, which means New South Wales, the only interesting race is that last spot, the 6th spot. And as a rule of thumb, if the Senate was to be balanced, when there's 6 being elected, there's going to be roughly 3 from the left, 3 from the right. So as you can see here, New South Wales basically has 2 for Labor, 1 for the Green, pretty much locked in. There's not much to talk about, not very interesting. There is the nominally 3rd right-wing seat. Now, last election, that went in 2022, that 3rd right-wing spot went to the 3rd Liberal. In 2019, that 3rd right-wing spot went to the 3rd Liberal. Indeed, for a long time, that 3rd nominally right-wing spot has gone to the 3rd Liberal. That's the norm. That could happen again. That's what most people, I guess, would originally expect. Maybe that's the starting assumption, the null hypothesis. But the Liberal vote has been going down in New South Wales in a way that probably might have the party a little bit spooked about that. So their vote is dropping to the point where you really can't assume their 3rd person is going to get up. I mean, they're now looking like they're in the low 30s. If they're in the low 30s, I won't bore you with all of the maths, but you need roughly 14% to get elected. If they're in the low 30s, in that race for the last spot, they're only on about 4 or 5%. And other minor parties could also be getting about 4 or 5%. So there could be a real race on for this last spot. So I think it's going to be, it's likely to be between the third Liberal, One Nation, and Craig Kelly. Craig Kelly for the Libertarians. Libertarians, God love them. I love them. I'm a supporter, as you'd know. But realistically, in most states, they're going to struggle to be competitive. I've got my ATA hat on now, so I'm just trying to be as objective and honest as I can be. But I think the Craig Kelly name factor, no one knows what that's going to do yet. So that's the extra variable there that might put them in the running. And also there's a chance the Cannabis Party. That's a big other sort of X factor variable in play. If New South Wales does swing hard to the left, this could be a state that goes 4 left, 2 right. If the Cannabis Party is able to steal that third right-wing spot. Now, I don't think that's likely in New South Wales, but it's hard to know what the Cannabis Party is going to primary. Actually, I'll hold that for a second until I talk about Victoria. But I think they have a chance. I want to sort of raise it now so that if it happens, I look like Nostradamus. But I think most likely this third right-wing spot goes to a right-wing party. It would normally be the third Liberal, but as they're dropping, it means the third Liberal, One Nation, and Libertarians are in for a tight race. Look, I really don't know who's going to win between those three. I put down here Libertarian out of loyalty, but I'm certainly not confident of that prediction. The Liberals in New South Wales are preferencing One Nation. So if the Liberals drop out early, that's going to probably put One Nation over the top. So anyway, that is one to watch, though. That 6th spot in New South Wales, keep your eye out. Have the Liberals drop down too much? And if so, it's a race between One Nation and Craig Kelly. And of those three, who's going to get there? And it depends very much then in what order they drop out. So then moving on to Victoria. Victoria is arguably going to be the most boring one to assess in one sense. And that is because it's the same situation as before. Automatically off the bat, you've pretty much got 2 Liberal, 2 Labor, 1 Green. There's not much arguing going on in there. There's not much room to move. There's only 1 spot up for grabs, which is, again, normally the third Liberal. This is very much the same story. Now, in 2019, it went to the third Liberal. In 2022, the Liberal Party vote dropped, and that third right-wing spot went to the UAP, went to Ralph Babet. That's how he's in Parliament. He grabbed that third right-wing spot from Victoria. That nominally third Liberal, that's that the Liberals would have thought it was their spot, that they normally get their third Liberal up in Victoria. The UAP got that spot in 2022 in the form of Ralph Babet. But UAP aren't running this time. Trumpets are running as a pseudo UAP, but I think there's not much chance that they're going to replicate that success. Maybe they can prove me wrong. Maybe I'll be wrong. But my impression is that the Trumpets are unlikely to replicate that success. And the other thing going on in Victoria is actually the Liberal vote is up in Victoria. So I suspect that's going to go back to the Liberals. I think this is going to be the most boring state Senate race to discuss out of the ones we're about to discuss, because I think it's probably going to just replicate the boring old standard 3 Liberal, 2 Labor, 1 Green, yawn. But, keep an eye out for One Nation or Libertarians to be a bolter there. They're going to be hoping the Liberal vote goes down, and they can piggyback off each other to try and steal that last spot. So, and I guess the Trumpets would be in that mix as well, if they're going to replicate the old UAP performance. But anyway, Victoria, probably boring, which brings us up to Queensland, which is, I think, arguably one of the most interesting here. That's not just parochial bias. But you'll notice in a lot of these, if you put your eyes further down, you'll see WA again, 2 Libs, 2 Labor, 1 Green, almost certain. We can say that about most states. But with Queensland, I would actually even amend this slightly from what's written here. I would say in Queensland, the only real certainties are 2 Libs and 1 Labor. Because I think I probably shouldn't have put down that 1 Green is almost certain, because Queensland has a history of their Green vote oscillating quite a lot. So I think that the Green is quite likely in Queensland. But you can see there's more spots up for grabs in Queensland. So if you let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the Greens do pick up that spot. We go 2 Libs, 1 Labor, 1 Green. That means there's still 2 spots up for grabs, which in conventional wisdom would be the 2nd Labor and the 3rd Liberal. What we've got here is in 2022, these last two spots went to the second Labor, as I said, and to One Nation. One Nation taking that cliche third right-wing spot in Queensland. If you go back to 2019, Queensland went one Green, one Labor, three Liberal, and a One Nation. So Queensland went four right-wing, two left-wing in 2019. So that's what they'll be hoping to replicate this time. But whatever it is, these last two spots, last time was Labor, One Nation. Most people will be thinking that's the most likely again, probably Labor and One Nation. But the third Liberal is definitely in for with a chance. They could knock off One Nation. They could knock off the second Labor person. And Jared Rennick is the big wild card here. And it's really hard to predict how he's going to do. I don't pretend to know. I suspect probably the second Labor and One Nation are the most likely outcome here. But that's such an X factor that you don't want to rule it out beforehand. Cannabis did great last time as well. So I guess Cannabis might be in the running. I mean, this is... with more spots up for grabs and the Greens probably falling well short of a quota, Queensland could get very interesting. And it's one of the few states that could go 4-2, as in four right-wing, two left-wing. And as you saw before that, the beginning of this section, I was saying the total Senate is currently got a left-wing bias, 40 to 36. The only way to address that is to flip some of these states. And it's not about whether it's Liberal or Labor. The question is how many right-wing, how many left-wing. As you saw before, New South Wales is probably going 3-3, left-right. Victoria is probably going 3-3, left-right. So neither of those are going to address the current imbalance in the Senate. Queensland is one place that could, right? So look in Queensland for the hope there would be that two Libs and One Nation and Rennick, or three Libs and One Nation, so that you could rebalance that Senate a little bit. But either way, keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out on the primary votes. Check to see if Labor is short of 25%. If Labor is short of 25%, they might miss out on their second. Look to see if the Greens are short of 10%. If they're short of 10%, they could miss out on their second. And of course, you want to see if the vote for One Nation and Rennick, if that's 5% or above, realistically, to be in the running. So I'll be watching that one on election night, and you should too. Going over to WA, it starts very boring again with two Libs, two Labor, one Green, which is how many of them have started. Now, interestingly, last time around, WA then went a third Labor. So the nominally third right-wing spot went to Labor. So WA went four left, two right. That's one of the reasons the current Senate is imbalanced at the moment. Because last election, WA went 4-2 to the left, four left wing, two right wing. Now, I don't think that's likely to happen again. It's possible. I mean, the third Labor is in the running. The third Liberal in 2019 got this spot. So the third Liberal would be in the running. But One Nation is polling very well in WA. And my read of the numbers is they're the most likely to pick up the sixth spot, right? The race for the third right wing spot. So from what I can tell of the state-based polling, One Nation's doing better in WA and South Australia than they are in Queensland. So now I don't know how accurate that polling is. So, take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I'd say WA, the race is the third Lib versus the third Labor versus One Nation. I'd be picking One Nation the most likely. South Australia is a very similar story across the board here. Two Libs, two Labor, one Green, almost certain. Last time the spot went to the third Liberal, which is where it's the cliche position, the third right-wing spot. But again, One Nation is polling very well in South Australia, much better than the Libs are polling a bit down. One Nation is polling high enough to be able to get that spot. So in South Australia, I would say the smart money is on One Nation taking that last spot. Not that you should take betting advice from me or financial advice, but my tip at the moment is One Nation to take the third Liberal spot or the third right-wing spot from the Libs in both WA and South Australia. Now, Tasmania is one that I think is it's worth keeping an eye on because of the fact that Tasmania has consistently been going 4-2 to the left. And that's because some people don't think Lambie's on the left. And Lambie has been consistently taking the third right-wing spot. Right. So again, here, pretty much two Labor and a Green are locked in. In Tasmania, you're not getting rid of the Green in Tasmania. Labor could go down enough to make their second one at risk, but they're probably getting 2. This is like the current balance of the size of Labor and the Greens is almost perfect for ensuring that they always pick up their 3 senators. So this is one of the reasons why the Liberals really do need to foster a relationship with a minor right party that they can cooperate with going forward, because what Labor's worked out here is that the Labor-Green relationship really does ensure that the left lock up those 3 out of 6 in most situations, except for Queensland, as we just saw before. So the Libs, they've got a lock on 2. The only spot up for grabs is the third right-wing spot, which keeps falling to Lambie, and Lambie's running again. Last time, 2019, the election, this is replicating from 6 years ago. It went 2-4, right-left split, but 2 to the right, 4 to the left, because you had a Green, 2 Labor, and a Lambie. That's probably what most people are predicting. Lambie does continue to poll well, and look, that's probably where the smart money is. But last election, the Liberals preferenced Lambie. This election, they're preferencing One Nation. One Nation's vote does seem to be tipping up a couple of percent compared to last time. So you get the One Nation vote tipping up a few percent. And then as long as they beat the Libs, the Liberal preferences falling in behind One Nation. Now, Labor is preferencing Lambie, but I suspect Labor may fall short of 2 quotas on their own. So I still think they'll get 2 people, but they won't have any leftover preferences to distribute. So I think there is an interesting possibility that the One Nation candidate in Tasmania, who of course is Pauline Hanson's daughter, might knock off Jackie Lambie. And that would bring Tasmania back to a 3-3 state. And that would be one of the places where the Senate gets rebalanced. So we've seen here that the 2 options for rebalance, actually Queensland isn't even about rebalancing, because Queensland's already 4-2 to the right. We need it to keep 4-2. And then Tasmania is one place where the Senate could be rebalanced by going back to 3-3, because it's currently 4-2 to the left with Lambie there. So keep an eye out for that. Whether One Nation can knock off Jackie Lambie, the Liberal Party basically needs them to do that if they want any chance of dealing with a Senate in a future election. Now, of course, Northern Territory, as I said, very boring. ACT, no polling available, but look, it's likely to be Labor and the Teal again. So again, it's supposed to be a 1-1, one left, one right. It's now 2 left, 0 right, because it's got Labor and a Teal. But again, it's going to be a close 3-way race. So I think the Teals probably get elected easily. David Pocock get elected easily. And then it'll be between Liberal and Labor racing for that last spot, which a couple of points swing, and it could go either way. So again, keep an eye out for that, especially if you want to know how easy it'll be for any party to pass any legislation. Speaking of which, let's have a look at what that all adds up to. Final tally. All right, that's just from this election, but the total Senate then, if all of my predictions came true, right? And then my predictions here is the Liberals fall short in the ACT, that One Nation does knock over Jackie Lambie, that Queensland goes back to a 3-3 split, but One Nation does get up. And I've got in my prediction here, I'm giving New South Wales to Craig Kelly, inshallah. So it won't be exactly that, but it's a good starting point. None of them are crazy. And if this is what happens, you'll see the total is the Liberals go down 2, Labor goes up 1, no change for the Greens. And you'll see here, and I think this is potentially the big story from the Senate. On the predictions I have here, it's One Nation going up by 3. Increasing their representation in the Senate from 2 up to 5 and becoming like a viable bloc in the Senate. I got the minor right, the minor left losing 1 by losing Lambie in Tasmania, and the minor right losing 1 in that I've got here Reddick losing and Kelly winning. Maybe it'll be the other way around. But Van basically isn't doing a serious campaign, so Van's losing there. The total of that, though, still ends up with the left here, Labor plus the Greens, 37, plus the minor left, 3, still on 40. Right, so this is still a left slanted Senate, 40 to 36. Right, it's a bit of a change around with the right-wing vote sort of a little bit solidifying to One Nation according to these numbers, and the Labor going up 1, basically regaining what it lost to Fatima Payman. But this is still a left-tilted Senate. So in this situation, the Greens wouldn't quite have balance of power on their own, but if Labor wants to pass anything, they would be, as I wrote here, hostage to the Greens and still need 2 out of 3 of the minor left. Right, so Lydia Thorpe, I assume she'd mostly vote the same way as the Greens, but then you still need one of Fatima Payman or David Pocock. So the balance of power would effectively rest with Australia's Muslim Party and the Teals. And that's only after you've got agreement with the Greens. So, I mean, to her credit, I think Fatima Payman's been making an effort to pivot to the centre. I hope she continues that pivot. But on current numbers, that's not a pretty looking situation. Look, the best case scenario for Labor, so run through this, if they do pick up the third one in WA, and for Lambie to win in Tasmania, and Cannabis to pick up a spot, then they would still be reliant on the Greens, right? So it doesn't really, even the best case scenario, they're still reliant on the Greens plus at least one minor left vote in the Senate. So that's almost certainly the situation. If Labor wins, either they're reliant on the Greens and the minor left, or they're reliant on the Greens and the minor left. So that's not a wonderful scenario to consider. Look on the other side. If the Liberals win, I know it seems unlikely now, but let's look it through. If the Liberals win, how would they be able to deal with this Senate? Realistically, they would be hostage to the Greens, right? Theoretically, with these numbers, Liberals 28, they would need 11 crossbenchers. And you can see here, One Nation plus all the minor left plus all the minor right adds up to 11. But when are the Liberals, One Nation, the Teals, the Fatima Payman, Lydia Thorpe, the UAP, Libertarians, or Jared Rennick, if he's in there, when are they all going to agree on something? So the long and the short of it here is that the Liberals are only going to get things passed if they have the agreement of either Labor or the Greens, which kind of puts into perspective everything Dutton's promising. Like whatever he's promising, just put it through the prism of, if Dutton says, I will do X, finish the sentence for him. What he's saying is, I will do X if the Greens let me. So that puts it into a perspective. It also, I think, actually, I know this makes a mockery of a lot of Dutton's campaign promises, but if all his campaign promises are irrelevant anyway, then the main thing that's relevant here is under Dutton, nothing will get done. Under Labor will be able to pass all of their worst ideas. Not their good ideas, right? Their good ideas could be blocked, but their worst ideas, because they'll only be able to pass things with the Greens. So this is actually what I'm outlining here, although it's very depressing in terms of the Liberals achieving anything, is probably a pretty good argument for the Liberals to get into power. Because if the Greens are going to have this much power in the Senate, then it's just better to not have a party they can influence in the lower house. So anyway, so this is, what's the best case scenario for the Liberals? Best case scenario is the right wing goes 4-2 in Queensland. They get their ACT senator back. And the next part doesn't make a difference. If they take votes off One Nation, if they take seats off One Nation, it doesn't actually help them with the balance in the Senate. So if they get those two, if they get the Queensland 4-2 and they get the ACT senator, then they would potentially be able to get stuff done with One Nation, all of the minor right, and just one from the minor left, which means the best case scenario, once again, is Fatima Payman would have balance of power. So she's in a pretty good position there, potentially, on both sides, no matter who wins. She could end up being one of the kingmakers of our parliament. So keep an eye out for what Fatima Payman's up to, everyone. And David Pocock potentially, in this scenario I've got here, that he gets beat, but, well, no, he doesn't get beaten by the Liberals. So yeah, still David Pocock as well. But I hope that's very depressing reading for you all. But one of the takeaways from this, as I've got down the bottom, I think probably the biggest takeaway when I went through all this is this could be the breakthrough election for One Nation. And I just wanted to mention that because last year I thought something very different. I wasn't saying it out of glee, but I thought last year that One Nation might be in a terminal decline. I predicted they'd get nothing in Queensland. They got nothing in Queensland. I sort of pointed out that they've lost lots of their previous candidates and members before. And I suspected that would continue. After I said that, they lost their only member in WA, and then they lost their only member in New South Wales. So I looked a bit like Nostradamus for a while. And at the time, I predicted that they might struggle at the federal election. It now looks like I might have to do a mea culpa on that. On these current numbers, the drop in the Liberal vote, or the increase in One Nation vote, and the fine balance between left, right in the Senate, I think that could end up being an incorrect prediction that I did last year. I mean, 2/3 came true. This last third, I'm changing my prediction at 5 seconds to midnight. Based on these numbers, I think there's a chance One Nation could win 5 spots here, bringing themselves up to 6. I predicted in this post that they'd win 4 spots at this election, bringing them up to a total of 5, because Pauline's not up for re-election. That's why I'm saying it that way. Look, there's a good chance. Ironically, their situation in Queensland is quite tough because of that 4-way race for 2 spots, or the 5-way race for 3 spots. So I'd say that one's still only 70% likely, and the Tasmanian one I'm not confident of. But I think in most scenarios, One Nation is likely to be bigger after this election, and there is a chance it could be much bigger after this election. And it'll be interesting to see what happens next. If the party has worked out its internal structures to be able to have the structures to be able to grow into a bigger party. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the inside baseball on One Nation. Will they be able to keep the team together? Who will be the future leader? I don't the answers of none of these things, but it could be interesting to watch. Yes, this is just having a look at some of these comments coming in. Well, it's good to hear. Stomping. Good to hear, Stomping. It's very hard to know, right? We don't have much good polling for Tasmania as well. So it's very much vibe. But I mean, the last time round, she was getting preferences from the Liberals and One Nation didn't do great. Those things are both changing. That's what could be a little bit different this time round. Sad state of affairs in the Senate, says Aussie. So a longer-term plan needed to get more right senator. Look, realistically, the Senate did so badly in 2022 that this Senate was never going to be good. But what we need now is the best possible result this year, not for the coming term. The coming term is basically screwed. Like in every scenario, the best case scenarios that I was laying out before still basically had, I think the best case scenario was it's possible to bring the Senate back to 38-38. Now, that's good because if the Senate comes back to 38-38, left and right, that would mean the right, if they all agreed, would be able to block Labor. So the Labor would need all of the left senators, plus they would have to convince, probably Tammy Tyrrell would be their go-to to try and convince, or I don't know who else would be elected, whichever One Nation quits the party first. I doubt they'll be very good at convincing Ralph Babet, but that's the best case scenario, is basically just a chance for blocking. But the election after this, right, after the 2028 election, if we ever want a Senate that can pass good legislation, we have to get back to at least 37 or 38 this election so that we can pick a few back up next time, right? It's because half the Senate's elected each time, you basically need 2 good elections in a row, 2 good election outcomes in the Senate in a row to have a chance in the Senate. As soon as you've got one bad outcome, you basically can't fix it the next election. You have to go through 2 election cycles to fix it. And it was a bad outcome in 2022. So the best case scenario is getting back to 38-38. And that would mean the left could block a right-wing government and the right could block a left-wing government, which great, gridlock in the Senate. I'm all for it. But it needs to be a long-term plan. After we saw the 2022 result, fixing the Senate was always going to be a 2-year project. And it probably is going to require the Liberal Party to accept that they need to cooperate with some of the minor right so that they can increase their chances of getting some 4-2 states, right? I mean, that's really how they need to be thinking, right? So try to lock in 3 right-wingers each state and look for a few states that you can go 4-2, the way that the left did in Tasmania by getting Lambie to steal a right-wing spot, by the way the Labor Party did in WA by picking up 3 Labor and 1 Green. You're never picking up 4 from the same party. So the only way to get a 4-2 is to coordinate with some other friendly party or even unfriendly party that at least also hates the other side. And it needs to be a two election project. better partnership and preference discipline. It's great for us to say that. The preference discipline's in the hand of the voters. So I think coalition tickets, like has happened with People First, Libertarian and Heart Party in New South Wales, and it happened, I think, with the Gap and Heart in Queensland, and I think is it Heart and Rennick in Victoria, maybe. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that one. But those running coalition tickets is the way to ensure you don't leak preferences. So I think there needs to be more thought towards that, and probably more the Liberals working out it's in their interest. Like this minor right is not an existential threat to them. It's the only way they can ever pass legislation again in this country, full stop. And once they realize that, they might change their attitude a little bit. Oh, the $20 million question. Look, if I do the answer, look, most people assume that when Pauline retires, One Nation fizzles. There is a good chance of that because if you look at the history, when Pauline stepped aside last time, or stepped aside, she should have run for the Senate back in 1998. She didn't. She ran for the lower house seat of Oxley in Queensland near Ipswich, and she just missed out on her lower house seat. So a different person got elected to the Senate that wasn't Pauline. And I think a lot of One Nation's vote is a vote for Pauline. She stepped away from the party imploded. It still existed for the years where it's missing from Parliament. It was just only getting 0.5% of the vote. And then Pauline comes back into One Nation, their vote goes up. But basically everyone else that joins the party, except for Malcolm Roberts, God bless him, quits. There's a drama. There's some sort of existential problem. So it did seem like it was very much a Pauline Hanson political party rather than a political party of members or people. And if that's the case, then when she steps aside, I'm not really sure where its central motivating feature is. Right? There was some thought that Mark Latham could step into that role. Obviously, he joined the party and has left again. Malcolm Roberts is a very competent and decent person. He's a very smart guy and good on policy. I would like to live in a world where he attracted votes because of his sort of policy nuance. I'm not sure if we live in that world. So, but we will have the next 3 years. So if I'm right and One Nation has a bit of a breakthrough, they'll have a few extra people in the Senate. Will anyone rise to the top? So the story hasn't been written yet. I'd say that the null hypothesis is Pauline steps down sometime in the next 6 years, or maybe waits another 3 years, gets elected and steps down. And then when she does, the party's in trouble. I'd say that's the standing assumption, but that means they have 3 or 4 years to do something to change that situation. Can they build their party into a party of actual members with branches and the members having a say so that they can become a mass movement that doesn't constantly drive people away? Can they put a so the next question coming in. Can they put some philosophical rail guards around the party so people know what they're getting? I don't know the answer to that, right? So it's up to them to determine their future. Can they fix those things? If they have a breakthrough now, that's not the end of the story. They have a breakthrough now. They've got 3 years to fix their structure to see if they can survive without Pauline. I'm supposed to say the Libertarians will rise up and become the major dominant minor right party. Yeah, look, I thought there was much greater chance for that when I thought they were going to do badly this federal election. If One Nation does well this federal election, it probably puts a pause on the growth of all other minor right parties. So I've got to be careful here. Like I'm saying all of this with my ATA hat on, which means I'm trying to be as brutally honest about my assessment of politics and economics when I talk about it as I can be, because I want to be credible. I want people to know that I'm telling them what I think. I'm laying out the best argument. So like in a different context, I would just be saying more vociferously what I wanted to happen. But my assessment of the brutal truth of the situation, if One Nation has a breakthrough election, it's going to make a lot of people just think, oh, One Nation is the minor right party. It's going to solidify them there. A lot of people kind of thought that, but they kept fraying at the edges and losing people and losing elections and people quitting and walking away in disgust. So they were constantly inviting other minor right parties, whether it's the UAP or the Libertarians or the Trumpets or Family First is having another go. I'd prefer it to be the Libertarians, but for whoever it is, One Nation was kind of inviting these other parties to knock them off the pedestal as the minor right party. But if they have a breakthrough and get 4 or 5 people in the Senate, realistically, this just makes the process a little bit harder for any of those other minor right parties. Now, that doesn't knock them out. You've got the Greens on the left, but that doesn't stop animal justice and cannabis being there and thereabouts. And when the Greens fall over, those two parties are well positioned to swoop in and become the neo-Greens. So the same thing can happen. Look, the big imponderable question, if One Nation does make the breakthrough this election, is will they lose some senators? Now, I'm not cheering for that, but it's a legitimate question given One Nation's history. That's why I said before that the future of One Nation, it really is up to them after this election. It would be great for them if they break through. Whether that works depends. What do they build in these 3 years? A coherent team with a consistent philosophy that could work together and bring in a proper membership base and a structured party behind them. And if they can, and a new leader that people respect, a leadership team, if they can do that, then they can cement themselves as the minor right party. And I'm saying that not because I'm not cheering One Nation. Obviously, my bias is the Libertarians, but I mean, that's my honest assessment that they could. And for the other parties, I guess their niche, their opportunity will come is if One Nation does start splintering some members. If they get 5 people elected and 1 or 2 quit, or 3 or 4 quit, that will be the opportunity for the other minor right parties. And then people have to ask themselves, what sort of minor right party do you want? Do you want Clive, or do you want a consistent party of principle and intelligent economics? And by the way I frame that, you can see that I have an opinion, but not everyone always listens to me. But anyway, gents, thank you for some of those questions and that nice distraction. We will see, I guess. Now, I forgot one important part of this puzzle, and that is going back to one of the most boring states when I was talking about it. Victoria, which I suggested could well be a boring contest. 2 Libs, 2 Labor, 1 Green, last position, I think, likely to go to the 3rd Liberal. Look, I hope it's Jordan Ditloff from the Libertarians. I'm not trying to shit talk him. I don't not want him to win. This is just my, the Libs seem to be up in the polls, and that'll make things difficult for him. So he'll need the Liberals to go down in the polls to have a chance. There is an extra variable here, and that is Labor is preferencing cannabis before the Greens. Now, cannabis is being led by Fiona Patten. Fiona Patten, formerly from the Sex Party, then the Reason Party, former member of the Victorian Upper House, now leading the Cannabis Party. Cannabis Party, depending on their electoral draw and they're spending more money this year, they can have very good outcomes. They've been on an upward trajectory over the last couple of election cycles, federal and state. The only thing really stopping cannabis having had a breakthrough before now is just that the Greens are so embedded as that dominant minor left party that already have that 10% plus, which is close enough to 14. So they always sort of fall over the line, picking up that 3rd left-wing spot. But with cannabis having such a variable vote and a high-profile person, and then picking up Labor's preferences, that could get interesting, right? If there's a last race. I know Fiona Patten pitched that she was aiming for the 4th right-wing spot. That seems to be what she thinks she can get. I'm not sure if she's looked at the polling in Victoria in much detail when she says that. The 2-party preferred in Victoria is still biased towards the Liberals at the moment. And if the 2-party preferred is biased to the Liberals, it's very unlikely the left is picking up 4 spots. So if cannabis wins, it'll be at the expense of either the second Labor or the Green. Labor looks like they're doing fine to get there too. So it would have to be if the Greens vote went down to 10% or thereabouts, cannabis vote was high enough, piggybacked off the Labor vote, got in front of the Greens, that would be their chance. Now, I suspect Greens will win and cannabis won't, but it's worthwhile just mentioning that one there. I think that's the only place where Labor is going to cannabis. First, Labor's going to Lambie in Tasmania and cannabis in Victoria. That's basically the only place where they're not going straight to the Greens. So that makes that one a little bit interesting to look out for. So if you are so inclined, you can watch that race. So a few Senate races that could be fun. When it comes to the night, if you want a reminder of the races to watch and not watch, feel free to come back and have another look at this or get in touch. We can talk through, and I'll probably put out a post close to the time reminding everyone of the Senate races to watch. I have spent far too long talking about the Senate. You can see it's a topic that interests me, which means I've left myself nearly no time to talk about a new tax idea from the ATA, and yet I feel obliged to. So even though we're coming up to 50 minutes, and I quite enjoy doing these in under an hour, I am going to, if you're only interested in the politics and you don't want to talk about policy or tax ideas, you can tune out now. And for people later who only want the tax, start at 50-minute mark, although I don't know how you'd know that without having watched the whole thing. But now the reason I want to get through this is I had a couple more ideas. I was going to do one on Monday, but then it was a public holiday. And then there's a chance next week. I don't know whether I'll be able to keep doing these. I'll be on the road, right? So I'll be taking the caravan down to New South Wales, running around, playing a bit of politics down in Sydney town. And I've got a few other meetings down there. So on the road, it'll be a little interesting. We'll see if I can still bring you this live stream from the back of a caravan. Stay tuned. Hard to make promises. But there was 2 more ideas that I really wanted to get on the table. And now I've really only got these next 10 minutes in which I can guarantee to share them. Like, there's 2 ideas, but I think it would be overkill to give them their own session, or maybe not. I'll see how I go. They're both related to capital tax, which most people don't find hugely interesting. And I can understand why you don't find it interesting if you don't run a business or have too many investments. It doesn't impact you too much. But it is in the world of how taxes impact productivity. And of course, if you've listened to me for a while, you'll have heard me saying that quite a lot, right? The relevant feature is not how much tax cut do you get personally. It's how much does this tax cut drive productivity, driving growth, driving higher wages, which is the thing that'll actually stop the cost of living crisis that we're in. So if that's your concern, which it should be, capital tax matters hugely, because capital tax really does directly discourage investment in private capital, which is the driver of productivity. So not a sexy topic, but a crucially important one. And there's a couple of ideas that I think that it could be within the Overton window that would really help drive the country forward. Now, you may remember from the start of this series, I gave myself the difficult task of ideas that are in the Overton window. It's easy to come up with great tax cutting ideas. Abolish the taxes. Right? I mean, it's easy to come up with good radical tax proposals. So I gave myself the harder task of coming up with tax proposals that are inside the Overton window. And that is quite a bit trickier and often quite a bit more moderate and careful and less dramatic, less libertarian that you may have come to expect from me, but perhaps also more useful if we're trying to sell it to major parties. So here's the 2 ideas. The first idea, the context of the first idea, with company tax, we've got a 30% company tax. And we've got a 25% company tax for some companies, which is great for those companies, but it does create something of a weird anomaly where you pay the 30% tax rate if you have a lot of turnover. It's not that you go up to pay the higher rate when you make more profit. It's when you pay the higher rate when you have more turnover. Stop that. So the cutoff is $50 million. If you have a company with $49 million turnover, you pay the 25% company tax rate. If you have a company with a $51 million turnover, you pay the 30% company tax rate. And there's no gradation there. It's just jump straight from 25 to 30. Now, that's regardless of how much profit they make. So you could have a company with $40 million turnover making 10 million profit. And because their turnover is below the 50 million cutoff, they pay the lower rate. You could have a company with $60 million turnover making only a $5 million profit. So they're making less money. They're making half the amount of money. They're making 5 million instead of 10 million. But because their turnover is over the cutoff, they're paying 30% company tax on their smaller profit. So it comes up with another bunch of difficulties and anomalies when it comes to how their dividend imputation system works and other things that I say I don't want to go into now, but half of them I also don't understand. So it's just a lot of complexity that's a pain in the ass that we don't really want. So my suggestion here is for those small companies, give them the opportunity. So don't require it. Give them the option. They can just stick with their 25% discretionary tax, or give them the option to switch to a cash flow company tax. What does that mean? Very good question. I'm glad you asked. So a cash flow tax basically means you can deduct a bunch more expenses of doing businesses that you can't under the current system. So some of you may have heard of this accelerated depreciation idea that has been coming in and out of political discussion for the last 10, 15 years. It's a good policy, right? It's a good policy. It should be open to more companies. It should be with a higher cap, and it should be permanent. The Liberals plan on making it permanent, only up to $30,000, but it's a step in the right direction is a step in the right direction, as I've said earlier in other contexts. So this takes that idea further. It allows companies the opportunity of writing off all capital investment as a cost in the year that you make it. So whatever capital investment you make, whichever tractors or computers or investments, whichever capital you buy, normally you can only write it off over an X period of time, 5, 10, 20 years. Allow them to, just as accelerated depreciation does, cash flow company tax allows them to write it off all in the year where they spend the money. It also allows those companies to write off all their buildup of inventory and their prepayment for future goods. It allows them to write all those things off against their revenue when calculating their taxable income, which decreases the amount of tax they have to pay now. They eventually have to end up paying the tax because it eventually comes back to them. I mean, eventually they'll make higher profits in the future than they otherwise would because they can't then write those deductions off later. But it allows them to front load a bunch of activity. It strongly incentivizes extra investment in capital, and it incentivizes bringing that investment in capital forward, which is only a good thing for the country and a good thing for those companies. So I suspect a lot of small companies would prefer that. So they would switch from the 25% model over to the cash flow model, and that also hopefully would over time address this, at least partially address this anomaly of differential rates. Now, the other thing I'd suggest is with small businesses that get this special treatment, and this isn't the only special treatment that they get. There's a series of them. But you've got this issue where, the moment you touch over that turnover threshold, you lose a lot of benefits. My suggestion is, firstly, we would want to index these thresholds, right? I mean, we should, the government creates inflation. If they're going to create the inflation, they should at least index everything to at least inflation so that when businesses experience natural growth, if their growth is only in line with inflation, that shouldn't push them over thresholds. But I'd go one step further. And that is to say, any business that's currently being treated as a small business for tax and regulatory purposes should continue to have that treatment as long as their growth is organic, which is to say, as long as their growth isn't created by mergers and acquisitions. Right? So that does a couple of things. One is it just allows these good small businesses to become bigger businesses slowly over time without eventually punishing them for employing more people. And secondly, for people who don't like too much monopoly in an industry, it's a sort of a subtle downward pressure on mergers and acquisitions, because if you grow that way, then you don't get to keep the small business status. But if you grow organically, you do get to keep the small business status. So anyway, that's another consideration on the capital tax side. So cash flow tax, or allow small businesses to use a cash flow tax, which allows them basically to just write off a lot more deductions earlier on in the process, drives down their taxes. So this will have a big tax hit in the year it's done. But then after that, it wouldn't have that big a tax hit, right? Because eventually this tax would catch up over time. So that's the first idea. The second idea probably has a little bit more relevance for you, mom and pop at home, listening to this. And the second tax idea relates to savings, which is related to capital, because how it works is, savings you save, you might only see it as savings, but you save, then that savings gets turned into investment. That investment gets turned into capital, and it is the increase in the quality and quantity of capital that drives productivity. So we were talking before about when that capital is, working in a business, how is it being taxed? And I'm saying allow them to have that cash flow tax, and that's a better treatment of capital tax. You could do it one step earlier on in this process as well, which is at the savings side of things, which everyone at home would have much more experience with. We all know the concept of saving money, even if you don't do it as much as you should. So this relates to capital tax as well. And I think this is one of the best ways we could go about lightening the load of capital tax in Australia, which definitely is higher than it would be if we're trying to optimally maximize productivity. And that is by allowing people tax-free savings accounts. Tax-free savings accounts. Now, realistically, this would need to be capped at a certain amount per year for it to be inside the Overton window. Otherwise, people would just shriek, oh, it's a tax cut for the rich. Look, it's a tax cut for people who save. Yes, rich people save more, so they'd get a bigger tax cut. But if we want to drive productivity, theoretically at some stage, perhaps we should be open to making all savings tax-free. I think you end up paying the tax eventually. It works for the country. But as I said before, inside the Overton window, by the way, thanks, Aussie. I like the idea too. Inside the Overton window, we would have to put a cap on it. And I'm suggesting now, and I'm open to other ideas, but like a $10,000 a year. So $10,000 a year, someone earning $100,000, if they could save 10%, $10,000 a year. And then richer people who are saving more, fine, they can still get the $10,000 in the tax-free account. The rest of it, they're just treated as normal. So that way you make sure you're not giving all of the benefits to the rich by putting that cap on. But then up to $10,000 a year, the idea is when you earn money, you could put that straight into this specific sort of tax-free savings trust. Like it would be designated as like your savings trust, which would be treated differently to every other investment vehicle you own. And whatever money you put into that savings trust comes off your income before you pay tax, right? So that becomes tax deductible for you. So if you're earning 100,000 and you put, say, 5,000 in, then the tax system would only treat you like you earned 95,000. So that's a good tax incentive for savings, which is a very good reason not to be taxing money as it goes into savings, because when it goes into savings, it'll earn return. And then when it comes out the other end, then you tax it. Right? So actually, this money will all end up being taxed in what I'm proposing. It just won't end up being double taxed. Because the way we work in Australia right now is we effectively double tax savings, which is, all the tax literature suggests you should tax capital income less than labor income, which is going to be very politically unpopular. But put that aside, we're currently double taxing it, which really doesn't make any sense. So how do you get rid of the double tax? Well, you could have concessional treatment in a bunch of different places. But I think that the easiest, the smoothest, the most clear is when you save, you put that in a savings account. That money is tax-free. You were never taxed on it in the first place. When it's in that savings trust, all returns are tax-free. And then whenever you take money out of that savings trust, the act of withdrawing it triggers a tax event. And then you pay tax at your full marginal rate. Right? So that money, always, all of that money, the original amount you put in and everything you earn in it, all ends up being taxed, but only when you take it out. Right? So a tax-free savings account that you can put in tax-free, you can accumulate tax-free, and then you pay the tax when you take it out. But by then you're able to save a much larger chunk of money. I would also suggest that if you take it out after retirement age, you pay half your marginal tax rate. So this can double as a savings vehicle for retirement. And we could flirt with ideas like if you're taking it out to buy a first home, maybe you can take that out tax-free or concessionally. We can work out the details later. I'm open to all those ideas. But the first idea is putting on the table tax-free savings accounts, right? And if people are squeamish about $10,000 a year, make it $5,000. Let's just get the concept on the table because I think that's a concept that has real legs. It encourages savings. So it helps people at the individual level for financial literacy and for their own financial position, making sure they have a savings buffer. People should be saving more. It's a good idea. And the government discourages savings by double taxing savings and then also providing free for things that we used to save for. So we have a political system that discourages savings. So we've got very little domestic capital accumulation. And that has a negative macroeconomic effect, but also a very negative effect for the people that aren't saving. So this would incentivize that good behavior at a personal level, which is great. It makes it a bit easier for people to, save up for the car instead of buying the car on a loan and then trying to pay it off and getting caught in a debt cycle. It makes it a bit easier to use this tax-free savings vehicle to be able to save up for a car, save up for education, save up for a house, save up for big expenses. So it just, I think, helps the human and it helps the economy, right? So we've got a lot of investment opportunities in Australia, and sometimes we don't have enough domestic savings for those investment opportunities, which means we rely on a lot of foreign savings. This great big foreign debt boogeyman that some people are so scared of. Look, I don't think it's quite as scary as other people do, but if you wanted to decrease the amount of foreign debt we have, there's only two ways. We invest in less stuff, which is a really dumb idea, or we increase domestic savings, which is actually a pretty good idea because currently we are artificially keeping down domestic savings by double taxing it and taking away all the incentives to save. So it's got that macroeconomic benefit that there would just be more domestic investment, right? Not necessarily more investment, but more investment funded by Australians, right? Funded by Australian savings instead of by foreign savings, which means Australians get to keep more of the proceeds of those businesses, which has a general benefit, a benefit for those people and a benefit for the nation. So that's the savings idea, the tax-free savings idea. I will note a couple of other things on this. There is often discussion in Australia of how we are too reliant on income tax. And nearly everyone who says that doesn't want to just cut income tax, as I do. What they want to do is cut income tax and then raise GST, right? That common refrain. And what they're saying is internally consistent. There is coherence. There's economic logic to what they're saying. But you have to ask why. Like, what is the underlying logic? You know, consumption tax isn't good because it starts with the letter C. There's an underlying reason why consumption tax is better than income tax, economically speaking. Right? If you look into that reason, the reason is consumption tax doesn't double tax savings. Income tax treats savings, investment, and capital more harshly than a consumption tax does. That's the very reason consumption tax is a better tax. So if that is being admitted by everyone who wants to cut income tax and raise company tax, if they're admitting to that logic, which they have to, if they're arguing for that shift, that's what it implies. We can go down that path more directly and simply. This has been much easier to pass through Parliament. What I'm suggesting is much more inside the Overton window than increasing GST. And we can achieve this improvement by just making that savings tax-free. Ideally, all of the savings, but at least up to $10,000 a year. Make that savings tax-free, and you are shifting the incentives of our income tax system to be more like a consumption tax system. Indeed, if you allowed all savings to be tax-free, on the income tax, that's called a Kaldor tax, which is just like an income tax that's been converted into a consumption tax, because they charge you the tax on the income, but only on the income you spend, not on any of the income you save, which is a Kaldor tax, right? So I think it's an idea that would sell very well. I think it would be very popular. I think it would help people in their personal situations. I think it is good for the economy. So that seems like a good tax policy inside the Overton window that the major parties could jump on, and I encourage them to jump on, and the minor parties too. Everyone take my policies, steal them, steal the ATA's policies. So that's those pitch. A couple of capital tax ideas. I've got some others, but I've already gone over time, and I think capital tax isn't a topic that gets people on the edge of their seats. So if you want the rest, you'll have to come and meet me at one of the events coming up. I'm not announcing any new events now. I'm going to be at events down in Sydney soon, but I don't know where and when they'll be. So you'll find out on X if you follow me on X. But come and find me in person in a pub and pick my brain. But for now, those two ideas, this a cash flow tax, I guess 3 ideas. As Ozzy pointed out, maybe I should refer to this small business status as a separate idea. So allow cash flow company tax, especially for small businesses, maybe for everyone if I'll get away with it, but to keep it inside the Overton window, allow cash flow company tax for small business. Allow small businesses to keep their small business status if they grow organically, not through mergers and acquisitions, and tax-free savings accounts to be then tax deductible off your income tax, and all returns in that savings trust to be tax-free and then just taxed when you withdraw it. So those are the ideas to improve the taxation of capital in this country. Not a sexy topic, but all topics that I think could pass Parliament, would get the approval of the voting public to the degree that they cared, and would make the country a better place. So I implore you, Liberal Party, instead of doing all of the wrong tax policies, consider stealing some of these. With that said, I am about to wrap it up. I'm just checking a couple of the messages to see if it's wise of me to put them up and then have to try and deal with it. This so often happens. I spend the entire time talking microeconomics, and there's a question about macro, and I can't help myself. I've mentioned it, I think, in a previous conversation. This was the Collectivitis podcast, I think is being referenced here, that the Reserve Bank of Australia, the central bank in Australia, currently manages interest rates they control interest rates, right, through open market operations, buying and selling government bonds. But they control interest rates in such a way as to target an inflation band of 2 to 3%. Right, so the Reserve Bank is setting interest rates in a way to try and get inflation between 2 and 3%. And I said, I think off the cuff, and it wasn't the center of the conversation, but I said I thought they should be targeting a lower amount, say 0 to 1% or something like that. So I think they should be targeting a lower inflation rate. And he's asking, does that mean interest rates would be higher? Yes, basically, unless you could bring down. Unless you could incentivize enough savings, right? But also higher interest rates would incentivize enough savings. But if you could incentivize enough savings through another measure, then that might increase the supply of loanable funds, and maybe that would put downward pressure on interest rates. But yes, realistically, I think we've got kind of politically addicted to the idea that lower interest rates are always a better thing. Lower interest rates are always a better thing for you if you have a big loan. They're not always the best way to run a country. I mean, they're certainly not great for people who are prudent and responsible enough to save a big chunk of their money, and now they're constantly having their savings devalued by both the inflation and the artificially lower interest rates. And I don't think it's a great thing for the allocation of capital in a country. You have a finite amount of capital being allocated. And one way that it's that capital allocation is determined is that people have to be able to establish they're going to earn over a threshold before they can access that money. The lower the interest rates are, the more that money is just scattered around for consumption and investment decisions that might not have been the right consumption and investment decisions. So people are just going into more debt than they, I think, reasonably should. And that's not just because I'm saying debt is bad. Like, debt could be great for you. Debt's great for some people, bad for others. The point is, if you get the right price signals, the right people go into the right amount of debt. Some people would go into less. If we're artificially setting lower interest rates, we're price setting, right? The consequence of price setting is you are distorting the incentives. And one of those distortions, I think, is we're artificially pushing some people into more debt than they should have. So yes, the consequence of what I'm saying would be marginally higher interest rates most of the time. The consequence would be lower inflation. So your money is just worth more, right? So instead of you getting stung with effectively a 2 to 3% wealth tax every year, you're not getting stung by a 2 to 3% wealth tax, but you have to live with interest rates being 0.5% more or whatever the case may be. So yeah, pros and cons. Unfortunately, as with so many of my ideas, the benefit is a long-term one, and it's an indirect one. It's hard to see, living with just less inflation where your money goes further and you're not having it slowly stolen off you without you noticing. That's a benefit that's hard to see. The immediate upfront cost is the interest rates have gone up. So like so many of the ideas I promote, I don't expect it to get 50% plus one in the opinion polls and the focus groups, but I do think it would be better for the country long term. And I hope I've convinced you, Ozzy. No idea if I did, but we'll leave that for another time. Anyway, over an hour 10 now, so I will wrap it up. But thank you for everyone for tuning in. This is ATA Live, brought to you by the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. You will be able to see our email address, our website floating down the bottom, taxpayers.org.au. Feel free to go over there, check it out, see what's there. I'll be putting up some of these ideas, writing up some of these ideas and putting them up there shortly for you to check out. And if you're so inclined, please check the top right corner, become a member. A couple of dollars a month helps us keep the lights on. You don't get a huge amount of special deals or treatment, but you get the good feeling from knowing you're contributing to making the world a slightly better place. So with that said, I'm not sure if I'm back next week. And if I am, I'm not sure when. I will try to duck in for at least one time. It may not be at the usual times, but we'll see because I'll be on the road. For anyone down in Sydney, I'll try to show up to an event or two when I'm there. So I hope we can catch up. Until then, my name is John Humphreys, and thank you everyone for listening along. Next time.